It's now 9:30 and I shall resume this inquiry into the appeal made against the council's decision to refuse outline planning permission with all matters reserved except for access for a residential development of up to 250 dwellings, a mixed-use community hub, associated infrastructure including public open space and community facilities comprising a replacement sports ground and pavilion with accesses from Church Street, Cooling Road and Buttway Lane at land east and west of Church Street, Cliffe, Rochester. This is the sixth and final day of the inquiry. Before we go too far, can everyone see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, thumbs up. All right, fabulous, thank you. So as we're on Teams this morning, it'd be beneficial if those not speaking could turn off their cameras and microphones. I see most people have anyway, so that's fine. It just helps the system run a bit smoothly. I've found that the more people on screen, the slower it seems to go. So, and if anyone has any technical issues at any point, please either raise your hand or if you get logged out, please contact the council and we'll get you back in as soon as possible. So yesterday we heard from some local residents and the witnesses for the appellant. Today I'll hear from the Member of Parliament, Kelly Tolhurst, good morning, and followed by the closing submissions of the Rule 6 Parish Council, Rule 6 Residents Development Group and the appellants in that order. Before we move on, are there any procedural or housekeeping matters this morning?
Good morning, Madam.
Morning.
I was asked to provide an update on the Section 106. I'm afraid I don't have one at the moment.
Okay.
I'm awaiting instructions, but as soon as they arrive in my inbox, I will let you know at a convenient moment. And hopefully, behind the scenes, the council can go back to the appellant.
Lovely,
So,
thank you very much.
Apologies
No,
not to
no.
have an update.
That's fine, that's fine. Anything else? Yes, Mr. Strong, good morning.
Good morning, Madam. I have just been catching up with my emails as well as dealing with closing submissions, but I see that there's a representation that's come in which seeks to raise some new point.
Is that the one from Mr. Keeble, was it this morning?
Exactly.
Yes.
I don't understand it, I have to confess, because you know we haven't proposed anything new during the inquiry. So it's difficult to respond to it. But all I can say is that if there's anything in it which you're proposing to take into account against the scheme, then I would need time to respond. But it's difficult to see what actually is being alleged.
Yes, I think there were two further emails from the same chap previously, I think yesterday and the day before. I think it follows on from those. I did note the comment about the plan, and obviously there was no additional plan tabled yesterday. So if you wish to sort of address that in writing, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll just sort of take it as submitted. But obviously, I've got notes of what was and wasn't put forward yesterday. But I'm quite happy to sort of give you time to consider it because I realise it's coming quite late. So
yes, sorry, I wasn't aware of two other representations yesterday either. Perhaps that's probably my failing rather than anyone else's.
I'll check that they've been sent through to you. They should have been forwarded on. They were from the same gentleman, just following the council's change in position. But let me just check that they've gone to you and we'll get them across to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, are there any other points before we move on? Okay, in which case I'll hand over to the Right Honourable Kelly Tolhurst for your statement. Good morning, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you've outlined, I'm Kelly Tolhurst, Member of Parliament for the constituency of Rochester Strood since 2015, and I've actually lived in the constituency my whole life and been growing up very close to the village of Cliffe, so I know it very well. I would like to thank you, the Inspector, for allowing me to address the inquiry at this late stage in the proceedings. as my request to speak is a direct result of developments last week when Medway Council took the decision, a very disappointing decision, to withdraw from the inquiry and not defend the unanimous decision to refuse the application by the elected members of the Planning Committee at Medway Council. I am speaking, there are many points, but I've drawn out a few which I just wanted to sort of give my position on, but I am speaking in support of the residents of Cliffe Woods Development Group and in support of their objections to the proposed development. But firstly, I would like to say that in the process, this application, the appellant did actually include me when inviting these stakeholders to be included in the consultation with the community. In fact, I had to reach out to the appellant directly, and they did not seek to engage with me further as the MP, which is actually in contrast to other development sites which have been and are a significant number currently within my constituency. So I was disappointed by that, but I also believe that there was little attempt to widely advertise the consultation process, and I do believe this is borne out by the omission of the wider community voice that was highlighted in the Design South East report. Now, Cliffe is a very old village within my constituency. It has a stable and settled community and remains very much a village in every sense of the word, which has a strong identity, heritage, character and community. The application seeks to increase its size by 25%, which is a significant increase in the size of the village, and in my view would have a detrimental impact on the village and the amenity of the people that live there, but also have a wider impact on the surrounding area and the neighbouring villages due to the scale of the proposed development, including the movement of the sports ground to another part of the village, which is currently an asset of community value. And in my view, it is contrary to the PPF, and in my belief, reconfigures the village. And I agree very much with the concerns that have been raised over the stability of the new location. The access to the village is by the B2000, with all the roads around the villages being that of country lanes and residential roads, which I'm sure, Inspector, you have noted on the site visits. The B2000 over the years has seen a significant increase in traffic due to the commercial and farm activity that has increased along the road. The number of HGV have increased, and issues associated with HGVs and the increase of traffic on the B road has been evident to me in the casework that I have had to undertake over the last 8 years for constituents, mainly in relation to traffic issues, accidents, HG movements at all times of the night, which has caused harm to local residents, but also an impact of the significant development that has taken place around the entrance to the 2000 over the last 10 to 15 years, or probably more than 20 years with the advent of the bypass. Due to the fact that the primary method for accessing the village will be via car, the building of an extra 250 units would have a major impact, in my view, on the B road, which in some places is not really any different to a country lane. The B2000 locally is regarded as an dangerous road for pedestrians and cyclists due to the visibility and the width in some places of roads, and the fact that it is well used by HGVs. The B2000, I would argue, is not fit for its current usage, and I feel that this development and the developments that are taking place have a cumulative impact, and considering the other developments in the area, which is where the proposed development would be taking place. And I also would like to add this point, from my experience as a Member of Parliament who has seen significant development over the last 10 to 15 years within my constituency, some of the modelling that has occurred around some of these development sites has always been accurate, which has left us as a community having to deal with unintended consequences, or should I say some of us consequences that we were quite dicting, and then obviously having to deal with those issues on the back of that. So I do feel that the access B2000 and the fact that there aren't from what I've seen any significant improvements to that, I would have great concern in the 25% increase of the village. I'm glad before we started, I had been also had notice of representation, so it's really good to hear no new road structure was brought forward yesterday at the hearing, because obviously I wasn't able to listen. I want to also support the concerns raised over the loss of agricultural land, particularly best and most fertile in an area which has a strong history of food production, and has and also my concerns with the proximity of the development to FPP sites and site scientific interest. We are extremely lucky within my constituency to have some internationally important sites. And further development in this area, in my view, and speaking to many of the organisers of these sites, will have an increased harm due to loss of habitat. And I will particularly mention here House Martins and Swifts, which are on the red list and have been present in this part of my constituency for many years. I've had the great fortune of actually witnessing them in flight, and I do fear with the decline in numbers and the impact of the sort of wider development on the natural environment within my constituency, this will add to the decline of these important species, which are only found in certain parts of my constituency there. So I do very much support the view of the residents group that the ecology report that relied upon for this application is flawed and may have some inaccuracies. As a local MP, I'm extremely concerned about the impact that this development will have on the provision of GP services at this location. I agree with the evidence submitted by the residents group in relation to the HIA assessment. In the Medway towns, we have the lowest number of GPs per head in the country. And at this part of the constituency, we have seen over recent years a significant issues in relation to the access of GP services, and many challenges within the community of Cliffe and the surrounding villages. Whilst any provision of extra funding or another facility is always welcome, I believe that a 25% increase in the size of the village, coupled with the further development, will put an increased strain on the services at this point, and I do not believe there is sufficient capacity to deal with the significant increase in patients requiring healthcare for development. And having had conversations with the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, it is widely accepted that this particular part of my constituency does have particular strains and stresses amongst the current services are being provided within this part of the constituency. This is obviously one of the most important concerns of all existing residents, but also those that are moving into the area. And I really, truly believe that the health requirements of any increase of a village cannot be ignored and must be investigated and provided for fully. I would also like to point out that the Rochester and Strood constituency has been delivering on the requirement to build houses. In actual fact, the majority of new homes built in the Medway towns over the last 15 years, so I'd say the Medway local authority area, has been delivered in this constituency. There is a Cliffe and Cliffe Woods neighbourhood plan, and I am concerned that this development hasn't been fully considered against the plan. And also, I would like to point out that there is currently a consultation on the NPF around housing number targets to make them advisory, not mandatory, and also where development changes the characteristics of the community. Therefore, in consideration with all the other concerns that have been raised by the Residents Association, I really truly believe that this application as it stands, that the appeal really should not be granted. Thank you, Inspector.
Thank you very much. If you have a written copy of your statement and you want to send that in, I'm quite happy to accept that as well, just to back up what I've heard. I did take notes, but just so I've got a full record. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions before moving on? Mr. Strawn.
Yes, if I may just ask Ms. Tolhurst something that she just related. I'm obviously, because we're now sitting remotely and I've just heard what's been said, I haven't got full instructions on what's just been said. But one point I have got instructions on, Ms. Tolhurst, was that you were invited to a preview session of the public consultation on the development proposal before it was submitted for planning application. That's correct, isn't it?
So after I reached out to the developer, I was then invited. Is correct.
Did you attend the public consultation?
I couldn't attend the public consultation because it was a limited date, at limited reference, and obviously I was unable to make that particular event.
And just in light of that, can I just see if I've understood it correctly? You're opposing the scheme on a number of grounds you've explained, but it includes things like your understanding of effects on ecology. You think this proposal is going to be harmful to ecology, is that right?
It is right, and I am having looked at the impact, knowing the reality on the ground. I do have concerns, yes.
But you're not an ecologist, I assume.
I'm not an ecologist. I'm not an ecologist, but what I do have a lot of experience in is my constituency, having lived there for 44 years, and also have great experience of the other developments that have happened within my site and some of the impacts that I've seen.
Yes, but you would agree Kent County Council ecologists are experts in the area, aren't they?
I would agree that there are many experts in this area, but also I do agree that it's always great when one opinion is given, that those opinions are always either challenged and scrutinised, and not one opinion is all correct, as being borne out over many kinds of developments and applications where there sometimes are inaccuracies.
Yes, Ms. Tolhurst, that's why we have the planning process. But can I just see if I can understand, do you understand what the ecology assessment and Kent County Council's view is as to the biodiversity net gain of this scheme? Do you know what the conclusions are in that?
Well, I don't have the report in front of me, but yeah, I understand that but I'm expressing my view. My view as a local individual who knows the site, and also some of the concerns, and as I mentioned in my speech, in relation to those particular species, it's something that I've been very much involved with, obviously, and another site close by to this, in relation to nightingales. So I have seen the reports, and I understand some of the work that is done by Kent County Council and other groups.
Yeah, I understand you've expressed concern. I just want to know if you've got an understanding of what the ecologists, that's not just our ecologists, but Kent County Council, have concluded be delivered by way of biodiversity net gain if this scheme were to go ahead. Do you have an understanding of what the figure is?
No, I don't have my figure. I don't have the figures. I don't have the figures to hand, I'm afraid.
And just similarly, you were talking about the B2000 not being, etc. Do you have an understanding of what the assessed levels of traffic are from the appellant, supported by the local highway authority?
Yes, I do have an understanding of the assessed levels of traffic. As I've outlined, I'm not convinced by some of the modelling. The local residents association carried out another survey which suggested that there was a larger amounts of traffic. From my experience, what I've seen as a constituency MP who have had to deal with the residents who live on that road, you know, I am always incredibly sceptical when there are suggestions that the impact will be minimal, because in reality, quite often that is very different.
Yeah,
and we've got to talk about reality as well.
Well, Ms. Halls, yes, we certainly do. That's why we have the assessments in the environmental statement, and that's why I was just wondering whether you actually know what the assessment is as to the impact on traffic congestion from this scheme. You may be sceptical about it, but do you actually know what it says?
Well, as I say, I haven't. I do that there is, you know, a low impact, and I'm suggesting that I think the impact will be will be significant. So that's my opinion, and borne out on sort of my experience.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I've got a hand up from Councillor Fribbins.
Yes, Madam Inspector, just a point of clarification, maybe more for the residents who might be monitoring this call as well. There are often references to Kent County Council, but my take, and you may be able to confirm, is the role of Kent County Council is just an advisor to Medway Council, who are the local planning authority and effective decision makers. It just may look as though KCC are maybe encroaching on the turf of Medway Council in making decisions, but obviously they clearly are an advisor to Medway in that role and not actually involved administratively.
Thank you. Mr. Strawn, you did have your hand up. It's gone. Are you?
I think I was trying to take it down and put
it
back.
I see.
I then took it back down again.
I see. It was a legacy hand, was it?
Yeah, but since I'm speaking, I've just in relation to Councillor Fribbins's comment, as you're aware, Madam, the Kent County Council have specialist expert ecological advice in the form of an ecology officer that provide independent advice to the local planning authority on statutory consultation to review and scrutinise planning applications such as this and the assessments made by the ecologists, and that's why I was referring to their views, suggesting they made the decision, but they provided the advice.
Thank you.
Proposal and its effects.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Holhurst, for joining us this morning, for taking the time. I'm grateful to you, and that was helpful to me. So if there are no other points, we'll move on to the closing submissions. Councillor Fribbins, are you content to start? I've received your written statement for your closing submissions. Are you happy to go now, or do you need a few moments?
No, just okay, Madam, we can proceed. Okay,
thank you very much. Over to you then, Councillor Fribbins, for your closing submissions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I have supplied this in written format for your consideration at a later time. So the closing statement is on behalf of Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Parish Council, a Rule 6 party to this application. The planning appeal by Tremport has enabled issues with the original planning application to be explored and to seek further clarity on the appellant's proposals. Much of this appears to have been missing from the original case put forward before the parish council and the local residents by the nature of an all matters reserved except for access application. The amount of additional detail complicates the consultation opportunities for the parish council and the local residents. The planning portal that last night was showing 591 documents, including the representations by interested parties, and approximately 127 core documents submitted as part of this inquiry. Even if the parish council and other interested parties were aware of which documents to access, they would still need to have an understanding of the content, structure and layout. While this may be typical of the number of documents in a planning application and inquiry, the application is consistently advertised as an outline application, access only, with all matters reserved. And the further detail, which, although indicative, appears to be a commitment to prove the principle of the proposal. As explained in evidence, the Parish Council and local residents would seek fuller details of the application of this significance to help inform an analysis of the implications of the potential impacts of a large-scale development of this nature. In evidence, it's accepted that the proposal compromises of an increase in the village cliff by 20% plus, although in evidence the appellant sought to compare the villages of Cliffe and Cliffe Woods and argued for consistency between the previous Gladman's Red Road development in Cliffe Woods with this application. However, there are many differences between the two applications, and there is a significant shortfall in community infrastructure in Cliffe as opposed to Cliffe Woods, as evidenced by the adopted Cliffe and Cliffe Woods neighbourhood plan, the comments of local residents and other detailed evidence. The appellant also identifies the shortfall of community infrastructure in Cliffe and indicates the potential of the community hub to provide some relief with a wide range of possible uses, including medical facilities, although this would be across the road from the village doctor's surgery, retail, community cafe, etc., all within the proposed footprint. Community infrastructure is currently provided by the Cliffe Memorial Hall, Doctor's Surgery and local mini-marts located close to the proposed community hub, which you would have seen on your site visit, Madam Inspector. The appellant indicates the community benefit of helping to support the viability of current facilities. Although this may be the case in other development proposals elsewhere, this is not the case in Cliffe, where the facilities are minimal and insufficient to support the additional 250 houses. The application provides a basic financial contribution to the Memorial Hall, but offers no solution at this time on the retail offer, except for one of many uses for the limited community hub. The minimal facilities already encourage travel to Cliffe Woods and beyond for basic needs, and this will be further exacerbated by an additional 250 homes. As evidenced by the appellant and questioned by Rule 6 party, interested parties and evidence of the planning inspector on the site visit, access for the new sports ground for pedestrian, including pushchairs and disabled access, appears to be deficient. In evidence, the applicant indicated that lack of footways in Higham Road to the south of the development, Buttway Lane to the north, and the pedestrian access via the RS87 was suitable. The north and south access relies on a shared surface. Although suitable for cul-de-sacs and estate roads, this cannot be the case for significant roads that may carry HGVs and the suggested increase in other road traffic generated by the additional destination created by this proposal. There is no available detail at this stage to know if the amount of car parking provision is sufficient for organised sporting participants and potential supporters, and no need for on-street and leads to need for on-street parking on Buttway Lane. The central pedestrian access relies on the use of RS87 from Church Street. Although surface improvements could be made, the initial access is a vehicle access for the properties to the rear of Church Street and rear access for a property to the rear of Church Street. They obviously have a legal right of way over that element of the footway. The element of RS87 is only wide enough for a vehicle, and there's potential for a clash between vehicle and pedestrian access. This also could become a point of entry for other sports site vehicle users by parking on Church Street and then accessing the site on foot. There's been no discussion at this stage with the Parish Council as owners of the majority of the RS87 alongside the Cliffe Recreation Ground to date. Although this is a public right-of-way, they have indicated they do not favour, this would be the Parish Council, do not favour any openings of the hedgerow for the permeability to and from the proposed sports field as indicated in the appeal plans. While pedestrian and cycle access can be managed within the development sites, there is limited actions that can be introduced externally to the site. Due to the lack of community facilities in Cliffe, there is a need to access facilities in Cliffe Woods, and the B2000 between and further afield. There's also a common ground that the B2000 between Cliffe and Cliffe Woods is not a suitable walking route and of limited use by cyclists, and this they are very confident. There is, however, an indicated reliance on the RS84A between Cooling Road in Cliffe and Perry Hill in Cliffe Woods. RS84A is a shared surface on an adopted road from Cooling Road to the small hamlet of Well Pen, an internal unadopted road, so it does not have the issues that Butway and Higham would have. From there, it crosses a field that is occasionally ploughed and obviously suffers in wet conditions. From the railway bridge, the Hoo Junction Freight Railway passes overhead. The remainder of the route has been paved to some extent, although the vegetation obviously often narrows the path considerably. From there, there is a shared surface down Perry Hill and Maryboys Road until there is a footway for the rest of the route to the Cliffe Woods Shopping Parade and Doctors. It would take at least 30 minutes, even for a very fast walker, to traverse this route. Except for the best weather conditions, it would be more practical and common for Cliffe residents and those from the new development to use a car. As the community facilities are so limited in Cliffe, the proposed development would be reliant on the use of the car. NPPF policy 113 travel plans would obviously be required to assess the impact of this development before the principle of development is agreed. The APCM recreation ground operates as a local green space in the neighbourhood plan and local plan as an outdoor sports and amenity green space. It has been formally allocated as an asset of community value, and concerns have been raised with the proposed alternative provision in particular access, and the concern that it is bordered by the rear of houses on two sides and other green agricultural fields on the other two sides. The APCM ground fronts onto Church Street, B2000, the main road through Cliffe. The proposed site has no such frontage. There has been a history of antisocial behaviour on the adjacent sites, with motorcycles and quads regularly using the Cliffe recreation ground, damaging the playing surface and intimidating the users. It is behind the Memorial Hall and extremely difficult to secure. The proposed playing field has been described as an open area in a similar manner as the recreation ground. It is recognised that improvements to parking provision proposed for Station Road and Cooling Road have the potential to remove the blocking of one carriageway of traffic, but those will still feed onto the limited mini roundabout at the junction of Station Road, Higham Road, Church Street, Cooling Road. Potential improvements at this location are limited in scope due to the available space, although some work is proposed. Some additional parking provision is proposed in Church Street, but the road from that junction up to the current APCM ground is not in the ownership of Tremport, but suffers from same parking issues as Station Road. The same situation exists on Higham Road, but no relief is proposed. The neighbourhood plan has now been approved at the referendum stage and is for adoption at tonight's Medway Council meeting. It specifies settlement boundaries around the sites that have been developed or have been granted planning permission. The plan includes reference to local housing needs surveys in Cliffe and Cliffe Woods. The proposal sites are therefore outside of the Cliffe Wood boundary, the Cliffe Village boundary, where department would be constrained. For examples, restricted to rural exception sites for local residents. The statement of common ground, while agreeing there is not a 5-year housing land supply, it does agree there's a 3.4-year housing land provision, which is over the threshold for sufficient housing supply in the neighbourhood plan. Although the appellant has their view on the housing land provision to the neighbourhood plan, this may need to be tested and clarified. The NPPF paragraph 14 inclusion is intended to provide some protection from the lack of an up-to-date local plan, Medway 2003, and development pressures this generates on a more up-to-date neighbourhood plan area. In the case of Cliffe and Cliffe Woods, it's been 8 years in preparation, involving the local community and wider stakeholders and statutory bodies in the formation of policies. The inspector's comment, I'll put the reference in there to KC Christopher Lockhart Mummery, with positive comments and feedback on the quality, soundness of the neighbourhood plan, and submitted in evidence the reference is in the written summary. The suggested amendments were accepted and incorporated in the referendum version, which was approved at referendum. The Parish Council are concerned that the consideration and application of the neighbourhood policies neighbourhood plan policies have not been considered consistently or thoroughly in the consideration of this application. While it is recognised there are several reasons for that, obviously the timing is an issue, the sequence of preparation of documents, and obviously this is the first neighbourhood plan to go to referendum in the Medway local plan area or local planning area, and a protocol for handling the impact of this has not been established. Accordingly, the Parish Council would conclude that the appeal against the refusal should be dismissed. There was common ground that Cliffe and Cliffwood's neighbourhood plan was now a material consideration and carried full weight due to the 4th of May 2023 positive referendum result and adoption by Medway Council as supplementary policy at the earliest opportunity, which will be this evening. It does include a need for additional Section 106 commitments. Settlement boundaries have been defined, and there are requirements for enhanced replacement sports facilities should an existing facility be extinguished, and other policy requirements. There's also a matter of significant number of developments that have been completed, underway or approved in the neighbourhood plan area in recent years and since the 2003 local plan, and these have been included as additional housing provision in the neighbourhood plan, and the impacts that these have had in their construction and impacts are still to be validated. In general, the nature of the proposal has changed significantly from an access-only submission to include many binding details that have not been subject to further consultation with the Parish Council, the local residents, or even the Planning Committee of Medway Council, that unanimously rejected the original application, and therefore it would have been preferable for this application to have been withdrawn and these details submitted for formal consultation, consideration, and including a full assessment of the neighbourhood plan policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cribbins. So next we've got the Rule 6 Residents Design Group. I believe we've got Dr. Brunskill for that. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good
yes.
morning. I can confirm I've just received your written statement. Thank you for sending that through. Can I just check the other parties have received it as well?
And I'm not yet, but I'm hopeful that it will be on its way to me, and I'm happy to listen along and catch up with the written one in due course.
Okay, Mr. Strawn, has it reached you?
Don't think so, madam. I'm checking my emails, see if there's a lag.
That's one of the joys of online working. There's a lot of refreshing going on, isn't there?
There is, I'm afraid. So no, I don't.
Yeah, likewise, madam, I haven't seen it in my inbox yet.
Not yet, no.
No, my team tell me they haven't received it either.
Okie doke. Let me just, I'll send it on from here. Hopefully that's winging its way to you. Dr. Brunskill, are you happy just to pause for a moment, just to let everyone catch up? Yeah, thank you very much. Do shout up when it lands. Just while we're paused, Mr. Strawn, I've just asked, previously asked for the other two objection representations to be sent through to you. They had gone to Mr. Edwards originally, I think, so they're probably coming through that way again.
I think I have got those emails already now, Adam, if that helps. So I got a couple of emails just forwarded from Mr. Legg.
Yes, I think he's just confirmed that he's just sent the closing. So.
Oh, brilliant.
Nothing like keeping you on tenterhooks, is there, Mr. Brunskill? Sorry.
Oh, I'm fine, don't worry. I'm actually slightly more nervous about reading out a statement when working from notes. It's I normally don't work. I normally don't read things verbatim. So
yes, yeah, it is it's a strange situation, isn't it? Just reading. Again, they might go to Mr. Simon and Mr. Edwards, so there's probably another leg to go.
Yes, madam. I've had an email from Mr. Simon saying he's poised, ready to forward it on, but I've got nothing yet.
Like trying to get tickets, isn't it? Refresh.
would it help if I sent it again, or?
It should have been sent. John just did say he was sending it. So if we give it a moment, Councillor Fribbins will probably get it first because it should be coming direct to you rather than via other people. So you're the yardstick by which we're measuring this.
There's no sign yet.
No. Dr. Brunskill, was it sent just to pins?
It was sent to John, I believe.
Yes, so it may be worth, if you've got a copy there, if you've got the contact details for the other ones, sending it direct to the other parties, possibly.
Yes, sure.
Only if that doesn't put you in a tricky position. It should be on its way.
No.
But just
give me 1 second to.
If you haven't got the email addresses like readily accessible, then don't worry.
Hugh.
Yeah, it's Mr. Edwards, and then
Hugh Edwards. So I've just got to. What I'll do is I found an email, I think, with everyone's address on it.
Ah, okay.
And I'll reply all to that. That should have it all there. It's coming through to John, Hugh Edwards, Chris Hibbins.
Yeah, the last relevant email I had was from John Legg at 9:10.
No, this doesn't seem to be. There's maybe an issue. The email there.
Yes, I received it at 10 from the residents group.
Adam, I've just received it via Mr. Simon.
Ah, right.
So
it's making its way through. Dr. Brunskill, it's probably, if you haven't sent yet, then it's probably
Well, I have.
withholding. Oh, you've sent it. That's fine. And you can all have it twice.
And Mr. Simon has forwarded it on to an email that's gone to Mr. Edwards. So hopefully the chain will work. I'll also forward it to Mr. Straw now, in case that's quicker.
Councillor Fribbins, have you got it yet?
No, I haven't.
And I will forward it to Councillor Fribbins as well.
I knew there was a reason I don't normally use Gmail.
Well, I got it, so that's it.
There we go. It's just arrived.
Perfect. And then Mr. Strawn, we'll just wait for the nod from you, and then we're good to go. Yes, thumbs up. Okay. Thank you for your patience, yes, Dr. Brunskill. Thanks for sorting that out.
No. Sorry. Maybe sort of slightly late and all that.
Yeah.
I'm also going to have to apologise. It appears that the local council have just started mowing the lawn outside my or mowing the verge outside my house. So
don't worry, we can't hear it. So.
Going. It's
that's fine.
I can hear exactly the same grass cutting, but it's a little bit further away from me.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Brunskill. Over to you then for your closings. Thank you.
This has been a closing statement on behalf of Cliffe and Clifford's Resident Development Group as a Ward 6 party. Madam Inspector, the Cliffe and Clifford's Residents Development Group would like to thank you for your patience and consideration when dealing with us as a Ward 6 party. The Cliffe and Clifford's Residents Development Group is a group of concerned residents represented at this hearing by a small number of volunteers, but is supported and represents a wider community. Some 237 on the mailing list and almost 800 on the Facebook group. None of us have any experience of a planning appeal hearing, and we apologise for any mistakes we have made. We all work full-time, and this has been a steep learning curve. This is an appeal made after the democratically elected planning committee unanimously rejected the development to the land east and west of Church Street Cliffe. The Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Residents Development Group is extremely disappointed that Medway Council decided to withdraw their objection at such a late stage, and before the neighbourhood plan for parish council could be formally adopted. This has left us in a position which we are unable to challenge key points of the appellant, since as Medway Council said they would do this, and then presented a limited case, which they withdrew when challenged. Medway's LPA has failed in their duties. Since this application was submitted, Madam Inspector, you'll find in the Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Residents Development Group objections of August 22nd and October 20th. August 2022 and October 2022, reams of complaints made to the LPA with regards to the poor quality recording of the appellant. You will find further sections within our group identifying missing key documents, missing during the consultation periods. You will also find professional commission surveys funded by our community, but Medway Planning refused to consider. They have relied upon the appellants, the biggest benefactor of an approval. Our group could not afford the £50,000 plus legal battle to take this to a judicial review, or the costs associated to a legal challenge to the environmental statement and the EIA process. But that does not mean we are wrong. It means that we are evidence-rich but cash-poor. Madam Inspector, we have been presented with a constantly changing plan where the appellant has responded to our evidence or queries by simply modifying the plan at the last minute. For example, on the 4th of May, the appellant's proof was changed to indicate modified access points, removing the primary access designation from Butway Lane, which is the only vehicle access point. This was in the new illustrative master plan, which also modified the pedestrian accesses. More importantly, we are now told that the informal use of the current APCM is going to be shifted from a new sports ground to the SNOS. This is a significant detail that will change the EIA and quite possibly the RSB statutory response. It is unclear, as this new informal recreational use has not been reviewed, consulted or factored into the SNOS from a facility point of view or ecology. Kent County Council's ecology, RSP design outcry and Kent Police have simply not been consulted on this. We have also heard that any concerns will be addressed at a later stage when the detail is fixed. But as we have seen, with this movable detail, has been used to justify multiple incompatible solutions. Cliffe is at the end of a road, forming what is essentially a cul-de-sac. It is difficult to unintentionally stumble into Cliffe. Cliffe can be characterised by open views and big skies, and is fortunate enough to benefit from an extensive RSP nature reserve. Cliffe is inherently unsuited to the current proposal. There are simply too many houses proposed. They will put an unacceptable strain on the local infrastructure and environment, and the development is unsustainable. Especially when the development in Cliffe Woods is taken into account. This would increase the strain on the area by some 600 houses. Cliffe has been subject to a number of small sustainable developments, mainly infill of existing land or development of existing sites. These extra houses, with one notable exception that Madam Inspector witnessed during the site visit, have largely not changed the very nature of the village, unlike the proposed 25 increase that the proposed development will bring, destroying a much valued community asset and changing the character of the village permanently. Up until now, the development within Cliffe has been incremental and easily absorbed. Filling in the land east and west of Church Street cannot be so easily absorbed. Worse still, the appellant loans a large amount of land in the area, and it is feared that this is a gateway development designed to open the doors for further expansion. In fact, the original proposal was for 500 houses. The proposed development of 250 houses is simply unsustainable due to the scale and will stretch the local infrastructure as a breaking point. This development would have a real impact on the wider community. Initially, there would be years of disruption, with some major roadworks enclosed, including moving sections of a busy road, while trying to keep them operational. There is also the matter of the construction traffic, many HGV journeys on roads that the appellant admits are unsuitable for HGVs. And then there's the ongoing and permanent strain on the surrounding, often single-track roads and critical infrastructure, such as the sewage network, access to healthcare and education. Local residents and interested parties have given evidence on how this will affect their lives. Be it cyclists forced off the roads, walkers afraid to share road space without pavements and traffic, horse riders disrupted by increased traffic, and lorries and local children unable to find school or preschool places within the village, or residents increasingly forced to travel for important healthcare. All of this will have a measurable impact on people's lives and health. In a time when we should be encouraging people to lead healthy lifestyles, this proposed development will limit their ability to do so. We have presented evidence on 6 areas relating to 4 grounds of appeal based on the original reasons for refusal. In proof 1, when presenting evidence on a flawed ecology survey, a survey that for whatever reason simply does not reflect the lived experience of the residents, and the internal inconsistencies were not challenged by the appellant. Instead, there was questioning on the nesting habits of house martins. The appellant did not and could not discredit that our overall claims of the higher number of house martins, which was simply using an example of the deficiencies in the report. The appellant relied upon the increased habitat for wildlife to get approval from organisations such as the RSPB and Kent County Council with their ecology report. Habitat that is provided by the SNOS, an area we now found out will cater for the informal activities taken away and not directly replaced by moving the current APCM. This use was not reflected in the appellant's plans and initial documents, but has come about in response to our questioning. The SNOS was welcomed by the RSPCA with the caveat that it should be designed so that users and dog walkers were particularly discouraged from venturing near the existing nature reserves. Witnesses for the appellant and the appellant themselves admit they saw increased dog walking nearer to the reserve. One must question if the RSPCB or Bioscan who produced the wildlife survey would have come to the same conclusions if they had known that rather than being predominantly used for walkers and to provide habitat for nature, the SNOS was being designed to take over the informal use of the APCM. There is no evidence in the Kent County Council Ecology and RSP there is no evidence that Kent County Council Ecology and the RSPCB know this will be used for informal leisure, such as football, cricket and picnics. It is not evidence in any of the appellant's drawings or design documents that the SNOS will be used for informal functions of the list of the asset of cumulative value nomination documents for the APCM. It is hard to imagine nesting birds and other wildlife being encouraged by dog walkers and overuse. This information was produced a few days before the hearing and clarified during examination, but RSPB and Bandstand could not have known this. The Kent County Council Ecology Impact Report already highlighted the concern of increased disturbance and predation by domestic animals on the site and the surrounds due to increased housing. This disturbance will be much worse as the proposed increased habitat will be much more heavily used than originally anticipated. It must be asked how this can fit in with the National Planning Policy Frameworks, sections 174, 179 and 180. The duty to enhance habitat, promote biodiversity and mitigate the impact caused by development. It is widely known that recreational overuse of the SNOS is severely damaging to the ecology and biodiversity. We have heard that when disturbed birds such as house martins on the RSPB red list do not always come back, especially when the eaves they use to nest, used as nest sites, are made of modern materials. There may be an increased number of houses, but will they provide suitable nesting sites? And will the SNOS be suitable for them to gather nesting materials as they currently do from the agricultural fields? In proof 2, the Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Residence Development Group presented expert evidence that by its own methodology, the report of agricultural land was flawed and it should have been assessed as a BMV. While it was challenged in regards to irrigation, it was assessed by an expert using a methodology within the report. This was not challenged. So what was not challenged was that the land adjacent to the site was sold as BMV, and that Natural England estimates grade 1 for the entire area. This downgrading of classification for process of development was supported by Mr. Robin Fearbold for the Dickens Protection Society, who has extensive experience on planning committees. This is surely contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework sections 174B and 175 for preservation of high-grade agricultural land. This must also be read in the framework of a National Food Strategy plan for 25-year environmental development and the Medway policy of preserving land, best and most fertile land. The appellant, throughout the appeal, has referred to the land classification discussed as part of the planning officer's report, which states that the land adjoining Medway urban area is the highest BMV, grading a Medway, at page 32, The reference material of this association was the DEFRA Magic Maps. According to DEFRA Magic Maps, Cliffe land, as part of the development, would be Grade 1, which is the highest available grading. It is hard to understand how Medway planning officers, and by extension the appellant, are of a misunderstanding that the land adjacent to the urban area is of a higher grade when reviewing these materials. It could be said that the Grade 1 land, that is in a rural setting, is more worthy of being preserved due to the farming resources, amenity and low levels of pollution. We are sure that Madam Inspector will take and make up her own mind on the validity of these claims. 3.3 addressed the lack of consultation on behalf of the appellant. While it is admitted that there was a public exhibition, this was not the point addressed, but the point the appellant chose to challenge. The point addressed was that the design phase that led to the plans presented at the public exhibition, key stakeholders were not consulted. Design South East were working from an inadequate and outdated list that did not allow them to contact key people. This led them to asking for further engagement, so that further engagement was carried out, as they felt that the short notice of the meetings and the lack of stakeholder engagement meant there was not a proper consultation. Their disquiet about this was known to the appellant and their expert witness, who commented this was unusual. The proposed plans were updated mere days before the start of the hearing, and these contained modifications to RS 84. None of the affected parties were consulted. Not the residents whose properties adjoin the public right-of-way, nor the parish council who own the land bordering it. They also own the hedges which have been cut down in part to allow access. It is typical of a lack of consultation and notice that the appellant has demonstrated throughout this process. 3.4 addressed the health impacts, and it was demonstrated and largely unchallenged that the report used by the appellant to support their application was inherently flawed. This report was so flawed that it barely met the benchmarks for a desktop study rather than a rapid study. Key publicly available information, such as the number of patients per doctor, was missed, and the opening hours of the doctor's surgeries were wrong. The existing difficulties were highlighted and will not be made better by the addition of 250 new families. A Freedom of Information request found that there are in fact 6.89 full-time equivalent GPs, far lower than the 13 quoted by the appellant, and used to model the hoodoo. As such, there are currently 2,267.49 patients per qualified GP. This is nearly double the number of patients per GP quoted by the appellant. These findings were not contested by the appellant and prove that the hoodoo modelling is fatally flawed. As a further example of how flawed this report is, it mentions the relocation of a bowls club, something not proposed in this plan, but in previous application from 2018 of 500 houses. These houses will have an increased impact on the Hyde Park surgery catchment area. This is hardly putting health at the heart of the planning process, as the HIA requires. The applicant's HIA report fails to take into account the provisions of the Healthcare Act 2022 and the focus on place of care at neighbourhood level. The location of Cliffe will make cooperation between different agencies very difficult and cannot be mitigated by the TARDIS-like hub or the hope that there will be more medical service provided when this is far from guaranteed. The medical facilities are already approaching critical failure, and the addition of 250 families will stretch them beyond breaking point. Nearly every item on the HIA assessment was deemed to be neutral or positive. This is simply impossible based on the flawed data used for the assessment. Much of this was based on using proposed community the use of the hub has not been fixed. This is again impossible to quantify. The hoodoo scoring must not be skewed by simply assuming the hub will cure all ills. Without manipulating the data based on multiple and competing uses of the space provided by the hub, the hoodoo score would be showing negative impact. May I remind you, Madam Inspector, that appellant has evidence that the potential use of the hub as follows: potential to accommodate a new GP practice and medical facilities, extension to the local primary school, preschool, nursery, shared workspace, meeting rooms, retail use, cafe and restaurant, etc. This is a truly extraordinary hub that would or even could accommodate all of these uses. not just for the existing residents of Cliffe, but for the extra families that will occupy the proposed 250 houses, especially as the hub is not meant to compete with existing facilities. It is also worrying that while the hub is meant to add to existing medical provision, this assumes that a local GP that has only seen 10 patients in person in an 8-week period would be willing to place a GP in a remote building near an existing surgery that already struggles to operate normally due to recruitment issues. In terms of impact on GP provisions, aside from the practicalities of providing an additional GP offering in a remote building, the proposal would be contrary to the objectives and statute outlined in the Health and Social Care Act 2002 and later adopted in Kent and Medway's ICS interim strategy. Transport to medical facilities is not readily available by public transport or other sustainable means. The hearing heard evidence that this was not included in the positive or neutral hoodoo score. The times needed to travel to access different medical care were highlighted, and the development will only add to these. Cliffe being car dependent, people are left with little alternative to use blue light services when they can't use a car, and the lack of public transport. An extra shuttle bus or bus to Strood will simply not alleviate this. The apparent rebuttals to a health impact reporting focus on the fact that the LPA made a decision to scope public health out of the EIA. They imply that HIA was almost undertaken in a voluntary capacity. But the LPA did deem that a rapid level assessment was required, regardless of if public health was scoped in or out of the EIA process. We have presented evidence that not only was the appellant's special advisors ill-informed of the current health conditions of the village, but the subsequent modelling misses those public health impacts which will have most negative effects on the existing and proposed population. The National Policy Planning Framework does not scope out the impact of health and responsive development. The National Policy Planning Framework, paragraphs 92 to 103, the Medway Local Plan, CF4, RTC7, RTC10 and HC1, and the Cliffwood's Neighbourhood Plan, CF5, Community Health, all demonstrate that regardless of the EIA scoring, the public health and health of the community and the impact of this development must be a significant consideration when considering sustainable development. The defence by the appellant that it is scoped out is a wholly inadequate response. A theme runs through all our submissions. That is that of sustainability and in particular traffic, which was discussed in Proof 5. The increased traffic will make the development unsustainable. Worse, much of the traffic will be HGVs unsuitable for the road, particularly in the construction phase of the proposed development. To add to the difficulties, the planned development will require significant road remodelling to provide parking spaces which will not address the number of vehicles already using the area, let alone additional vehicles. The roads around Cliffe are simply not suitable for the increased volume of traffic the development will bring, and the proposed new sports ground will only add to these issues. The roads, apart from the B2000, are largely single track without pavement, or pavement only in small sections. They cannot accommodate the increased traffic in a sustainable way. Not the increased construction traffic, nor the addition of the cars associated with 250 new houses. Mention was made to charging points being provided for EVs, both private and public. While this is clearly laudable, it will not alleviate the issue of the sheer volume of cars. This is an issue of quantity, not type. There are road improvements proposed. While these will go some way to lessen the impact of the vehicles associated with 250 new houses, they will not alleviate it. There are too many pinch points. The roundabout at the junction of Church Street, Cooling Road, Higher Road and Station Road cannot be remodelled enough to allow for the increased volume and is the only viable route into the village. Just north of the roundabout, no improvements can be made as the road is bordered on both sides by privately owned houses. Further into the village, the improvements end at the junction with Millcroft Road. The proposed new sports ground will be located at the other end of the village, and there will be an increase of traffic movements further along Church Street, where there is no proposed mitigation. This means to alleviate For parking situation, the proponents has proposed designing in a number of new parking bays for residents of the houses on Church Street, just north of the roundabout, will still park on their drive. And with short nature of these drives, it means that the cars parked on them will protrude into the road. As this section is private property on both sides of the street, no mitigation to the existing situation is possible, and the road will remain narrowed by parked cars. That people have to negotiate by letting cars pass, stopping at entrance to Highland Road or Norwood Close. There is also bus stops in either direction located along the section of road, further increasing congestion. The opponents have proposed further mitigation in forms of new signage and road markings. While welcome, they do not address the actual issues of the nature of the road. In one case, the sign saying that a road is unsuitable for HGVs is somewhat ironic, as the opponent intends to increase the number of HGVs using that road for at least 4 years. The hearing has heard evidence that the bus service, even if improved, and any improvements to cycleways will not alleviate the increased traffic due to its location and nature of the roads around Cliffe, and very car dependent. At the moment, the increased traffic, especially on match days, does not progress further into the village. This will clearly change. For many, walking and cycling on lit roads without pavement is simply not a viable option. It will cease to be an option for many more with the increased volume of traffic, especially with the shared surface roads left as they are, currently with no additional upgrades, improvements or modifications planned as per the manual street. Our final proof, number 6, dealt with suitability of the new sports ground. The proposed new ground would clearly be a technical improvement, giving a better surface and possibly more pitches and tennis courts. But this is only improvement if the facilities are used. The local community has been told that these are better facilities, but the community has not been consulted on what they actually want or will use. The location is much less suitable than the current APCM, being located at the north end of the village, the furthest point away from the main vehicle access point at the roundabout. The survey of Cliffe residents showed that fewer people would use the facilities, and those that would use them were much more likely to access the main car. This was particularly true for anyone with mobility issues. The proposed walking and cycleways would only marginally help this, as they're located almost entirely within the proposed development, and then open up onto unlit single-track roads without pavement at either end. The proposed middle route, RS87, also starts on a section of Church Street without pavement. Sports England did not raise any objection to the sports facilities, but during the inquiry it became apparent that the split between the formal use of the matches and organised clubs was going to be differentiated from the informal recreational and meeting use of the current APCM. This means that the use will change, and a much-loved community feature, that is the village getting together, will be gone, as the informal users will be separated from the sports teams. The new facilities will be more restricted from the current ones, with Kent Police and Zanak Crime recommending that they're locked out of hours. This is in contrast to the current APCM site, which is open all the time. The location of the new facilities is also not overlooked in the same way as the APCM. Historically, at the side of the village in the rugby pitches, there have been a number of incidents of antisocial behaviour and vandalism. Madam Inspector, I believe you saw the 2 burnt-out benches located in the north of the rugby pitch. There is a very real concern that the new pitches would be vandalised and damaged. The proposed accessway along RS87 have also been sites of antisocial behaviour, and this effect, and the effect this will have on potential users simply cannot be ignored, especially if all of these end on roads without pavement, and at the north and south ends these roads are also unlit, leading increased fear of antisocial behaviour. In the users is evidenced by the Cliffe and Cliffe Residents Group Development Survey. As for access routes to the sports ground, will all start on unpaved, often unlit roads. This will restrict the use of people with disability, contrary to British Standard 8301 2018 and Manual for Street Guidance. In contrast, the APCM ground has access via a road with pavement and lighting. is also more overlooked, and this was the biggest concern of residents identified in the community survey. The new proposed area for informal use is for snots. This is contrary to the other proposed uses of the snots to provide a natural habitat for wildlife. Unlike the APCM, this will not be overlooked in the same way, meaning that people who feel vulnerable will not use it as willingly, especially early or late when it is done. It was suggested that this would be overlooked by the development, whereas it only be on one side and is not located near a busy road. There is less through traffic and natural surveillance as a result. It is difficult to see how this can be a replacement for an asset of community value. And it was very apparent during the cross-examination of the sports advisor, the relocation of the informal sports carried out on the playing field has not been assessed by a professional report. Therefore, no one has assessed if a better or equivalent offering has been assessed as part of this application. The current APCM is much loved and used, acts as a meeting place for the community. It is in constant use and residents feel safe using it, even in the dark. Separating the formal and informal use will destroy its community asset. While the new sports ground will undoubtedly have a better playing surface, the APCM pitches are not inadequate. The replacement may be technically better, but will result in a dramatic loss of amenity. Taken as a whole, the new ground is simply not a replacement for something that is better than is currently enjoyed and loved by the community. This cannot be a better or equal offering, as the use for informal sports and recreational simply is not being considered in the applicant's documents. There have been no documents proposed to mitigate this impact, as this application is reserved, apart from access, which is very concerning that the main users, the informal users, have not been considered for sustainability, safety or amenity purposes. The Cliffe and Cliffe Resident Development Group is not opposed to building houses, or even building houses within Cliffe. We simply want to preserve the nature and character of a village and change incrementally. This is simply a matter of scale. Madam Inspector, you have heard how the local infrastructure is already being strained. The sewage pump keeps breaking. The difficulty in getting doctors' appointments, overcrowded schools and the poor state of the roads. The proposed development will stretch these to breaking point and beyond, with little effective mitigation. Even the improvements that allow pedestrian and cycling to Cliffe Woods will give little mitigation. The path will still be unlit and will not provide a reasonable alternative route for the sick and those with restricted mobility to seek medical treatment at the Cliffs Woods surgery. The route along RS 84 from Wellpen, Cliffe to Cliffe Woods is over 2 kilometres long, which according to CIHT, provided for journeys on foot, is greater than the preferred maximum distance for sustainable pedestrian travel. This is a 25% increase in the number of houses within the village and will cause medium-term disruption due to construction and long-term issues. There will be a real and measurable impact on the community and the quality of their lives, removing open views and big skies at the heart of the village. It will also remove much loved asset of community value, replacing it with 2 assets, each with less amenity, and when combined, less amenity as a whole. We are not opposed to development, but this is the wrong type of development on an unsustainable scale. It will dramatically change the village while adding little to the overall housing stock in the area. There are already many developments in progress and being applied for, not just in Cliffe Woods, but also in surrounding areas such as High Houston, where 700 houses are planned. Allowing this development will cause real damage to Cliffe for little wider gain, ending the current lifestyle of the community. Much of this mitigation being somewhat nebulous and to be decided on later or incompatible with other mitigation, most notably a community hub. Cliffe already has a community hub, and there is no guarantee that any of the users of the new hub will materialise or not compete with existing facilities. In short, the mitigation either duplicates what is already present or will not, in fact, mitigate or will not be implemented. There are also legitimate fears that this is being used as a gateway development for the appellant, and as the appellant and large areas of the surrounding land. Madam Inspector, we're not resistant to change. We just wish that the change is manageable. This is a matter of scale. The objection has always been on a matter of scale, not to change itself. Madam Inspector, that concludes the closing statement of the Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Resident Group. And on behalf of the Cliffe and Cliffe Woods Resident Development Group, I thank you for your help and allowing participation in this hearing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brunskill. That was good timing because I think the grass cutter got a bit closer towards the end.
Yes, and I really should have had some water. I didn't quite realise how long that had done.
Yeah, well done. Well, thank you very much for that. That was really helpful. So we've had just over an hour. It's just coming up to 11 o'clock. Do we want a short break, or Mr. Strawn, are you happy to carry on?
I think a short break would be helpful, just so that I can then circulate the submissions to you.
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
You won't have that awkward pause. Well, I hope I won't. We'll see how I get on. Should I, just to do that, should I use, which is the email circulation address? I got one from, I was just seeing if there was a convenient one which had everyone on it, but don't.
Probably not.
No, I'll try and see if I can create one.
Okay, thank you. If you struggle, just send it to John Legg and we can send it out from there. Mr. Duffer, you've got your hand up.
Yes, madam, just so that I don't interrupt Mr. Strawn when we start with his closings after the break. I've just had an update from my instructing solicitor in terms of the section 106.
Yes.
I'm afraid we've only managed to go back to the appellant this morning with final comments on the 106. As I understand, essentially matters are all agreed, save for the proposed heads of terms in respect of the pavilion and pitch leases. I think they are nearly agreed, but there are a few outstanding matters. In consequence, I anticipate that the parties will need a little bit more time to finalise the document and get you a final copy of it, and then obviously the appellant will need time to get that signed or for the signing process to take place. So I just wanted to give you that update now.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. That's fine. Before we finish, after we've heard the last closings, then we can just have a chat about possible dates, just so that you've got all the parties have got enough time just to consider the document. That's not a problem at all. So thank you for the update. Shall we just take 10 minutes till just after 11, and then we'll resume with the final closing. Okay, then we're adjourned then until, well, we'll say 11. That's 7 minutes, and if we need any longer, we can then add a bit on. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back. I'm just waiting to see if a few people pop up on my screen. Mr. Dufer, Councillor Fribbins. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and Dr. Brunscott.
Sorry, madam.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Can I just check that you've all got the closings? Have they reached you?
Yes, madam. They've reached me.
Yes, I have that.
Perfect. Councillor Fribbins?
Just checking, I don't seem to have it yet.
It's been copied into your parish council email by the looks of it. It was from Mr. Edwards.
Yes, I've got it. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, then Mr. Strawn, time for your closing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, madam, and I hope you can hear me clearly, but let me know if that changes.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you.
Good. Just by way of preamble, I do adopt our opening statement. I don't set it out again here. And as the council has withdrawn its reasons for refusal, these submissions are mercifully shorter than they might have otherwise been, because the council now accepts planning permission should have been granted, and none of what had been identified as the main issues would have been so at the start of the inquiry in light of the reasons for refusal. In my opening statement, I identified that the appeal should never have been necessary, and as the inquiry closes with the benefit of the council's amended statement of case, that has been confirmed. Having called evidence, which was then tested at the inquiry, the council's withdrawn all 4 reasons, and it now candidly accepts, in light of all the evidence, which is the basis upon which planning decisions are meant to be made, that all of its reasons for refusal are unsustainable and the appeal should be allowed. Had the council faced up to that reality when the application was being considered originally, planning permission would have been granted in accordance with the officer recommendation. In light of first of all, the plan-led system, secondly, the clear guidance in the framework as to the need to ensure that sustainable development in accordance with the development plan should proceed without delay, and the grip of the housing crisis, not just nationally, but experienced so acutely in Medway itself, no one challenging its existence. We say it's deeply regrettable that the appellant has had to go through the appeal process in order to expose that formal position of the council. The development should have been permitted to proceed on normal principles under section 38(6) of the 2004 Act. But the tilted balance under paragraph 11 of the framework, which is common ground is engaged, strongly reinforces that. The benefits of the development, we say, are overwhelming. But what's of particular concern here is how seriously and disturbingly the planning system is being distorted by a basic failure. That failure was by members in failing to consider the merits of the development objectively and resorting to notions of perception. I emphasise a member failure. That is because the objectivity and professionalism of the council's officers should be properly recognised and indeed commended. They did their job completely professionally and objectively in analysing the appeal scheme against policy and recommending approval in light of all the statutory consultation and the evidence before them. The council's committee report is a comprehensive, truly objective analysis of the planning merits of the scheme. It is a sad fact of life that acting professionally in that manner attracts such little respect and indeed appears to attract opprobrium from members of the public that the officers are serving. However, it is important to note that in light of the evidence given by Mr. Churchill orally, he was the council's independent planning witness at the inquiry called to try and defend the members' reasons for refusal. The council, again in consultation with its members, now recognise that the reasons for refusal are without foundation, and the professional approach of the officers to the scheme has finally been recognised. Unfortunately, it seems that members were swayed on the night by an emotive, but we say the baseless objections to the new development, regardless of its actual merit and regardless of the objective assessment against development plan and national policy. This is exposed by the fact that opposition to delivery of the essential new housing and affordable housing at a settlement like Cliffe is whipped up with straplines like "say no to 250 new houses." And such exhortation is illustrative of the problem. Why automatically say no for houses and affordable houses that are needed? It should depend on the merits of the scheme. And that sort of knee-jerk reaction and call to arms pays no regard to what is actually being proposed. It's easy to say such things and to instill concerns and fears that are unjustified. And the reaction it prompts is inevitable. But adding to the fears of people who are naturally resistant to change, whether it's good or bad, is an unsatisfactory way to proceed. It's a reality that residents, by definition those enjoying the comfort of homes, readily forget about what a housing crisis actually means for real people, including those who desperately need affordable homes to live in places like Cliffe, as was covered in opening. Saying no to new homes in this way, without objectively considering the planning merits of the development, represents the very opposite of what's meant to happen under a planning-led system, and it perpetuates the housing crisis. But that problem has been compounded by misinformation repeated again and again, which has no basis. It's not merely just saying no to new homes where no proper reasons given for saying no. It has become clear that residents and those who've been vocal in opposing the scheme are doing so without taking into account the reality of what's proposed. And Madam, that's typified by the petition that was presented at the inquiry, which you've got. It's unsurprising that people would sign a petition against development where they're told it will cause harm to air quality, cause harm to their noise environment, harm to the environment and ecology. But none of those things is true of this scheme. The petition, therefore, is against a fictional development, not the appeal scheme. It's not the one that the appeal scheme represents or the benefits it delivers. In fact, the appeal scheme has been objectively and rigorously assessed through the EIA process, supported by competent experts, and then independently scrutinised by the council and its experts and consultees as delivering significant benefits and avoiding the harms that are actually claimed to arise. It will, for example, have no material effect on air quality or noise or traffic congestion. Far from harming ecological interests, it will deliver a 20% biodiversity net gain for the environment. And even Ms Tolhurst MP today in her presentation was unaware of this, yet she sees fit to object to the proposal on ecological grounds. The same is true of the objection on the other grounds, such as highways or impact on Cliffe itself. And likewise, when people are told about the loss of the existing APCM ground, without an explanation of the bigger area and enhanced replacement sports pitch and facilities, which all professionals unanimously accept will be an enhancement for the position for Cliffe, it's easy to see that that will prompt objection, but an objection which doesn't reflect reality. And that's then compounded by the complete silence about the huge areas of amenity open space that are being delivered for Cliffe for the first time by the appeal scheme. In addition to the local areas of play, the local equipped areas of play designed as local landscape areas of play, and the amenity open space within the scheme, a further 9.2 hectares, and just to put that in other terms, that nearly 23 acres of dedicated semi-natural amenity open space for recreation is provided for the village. And it's no wonder that objective assessment by officers, and now Mr Churchill in oral evidence, recognised the merits of the scheme. The objections that have been advanced do not just ignore those realities, but they're clearly made unaware of them. Because it's not just the petition which fails to reflect the development proposed, but also each and every one of the template letters of opposition are now individual statements of opposition. Time and time again at the inquiry, we've heard people expressing objection in ignorance of what's proposed. I mean, that included at its most acute, Mr Churchill advancing written evidence in ignorance of the public transport enhancements in the form of the dedicated new shuttle bus service from Cliffe to Strood Station. Once this was drawn to his attention, he had no difficulty in accepting the sustainability of what was proposed, as had been the case for Cliffe Woods. But it's also repeatedly included in the residents who are unaware what's actually being proposed as well, whether in the form of benefits, for example, road improvements to the traffic situation in Cliffe, the Class E community hub, thinking it was a community hall to compete with the Memorial Hall, which it is not, and controlled by condition. The amenity space being provided, being unaware of the 9.2 hectares of semi-natural open space, or thinking it won't be available for informal use. Or whether it's in terms of perceived harms, which have no basis in fact, such as those in relation to air quality, noise or congestion, harm to ecology, harm to the SPA Ramsar, harm to the rugby club facilities, harm to safety in terms of road layouts, closure of the B2000, or many of the other unjustified harms that have been asserted. Madam, the list of unfounded fears goes on and on, but that sadly is a product of a campaign that invites people to say no to something, but without properly informing what they're actually saying no to. People are happy to object to the proposal, but without looking at the application of what it shows. To add insult to injury for the appellant, the residents group has now sought to suggest a lack of engagement. The facts demonstrate that nothing could be further from the reality of the situation, as is clear from the statement of community involvement. Although under no obligation to do so, there's no statutory obligation to do this engagement of this kind, the appellant in fact commissioned the independent body Design South East to undertake engagement, initially in the form of a community workshop process. The appellant didn't take part in that process, so it could be independent. And in consultation with the parish council, it sought to identify those bodies who might wish to take part and to assimilate their contract addresses from the parish council. The workshop was held, but poorly attended. Despite the effort, the appellant's now criticised for this. Concerns are now expressed that invitations were not actually received. Even if that were the case, it's not a criticism that could be directed at the appellant. But in any event, Design South East has explained that who it sent invitations to, and the fact that many emails were opened by recipients, even if they chose not to attend. And you recall the evidence of Miss Shorter, which was revealing. She accepted, for example, in respect of the school, that the invitation may well have been received by the head teacher, but she suggested it wasn't incumbent on the head teacher to pass it on to those at the school who might be interested. We respectfully disagree. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, as the criticism of lack of engagement based on the Design South East process is utterly hollow. Having conducted that exercise, the appellant went on to conduct a further full public engagement exercise itself. It sent out leaflets to the entire area. It held a public exhibition attended by its consultants to invite views about the proposed development. The MP herself was invited, it's recorded in the statement of community involvement, she's also confirmed that, but didn't attend. The event was very well attended by others. Questionnaires were available and completed. Every opportunity was given for residents to see what was proposed and to respond to it before any application was submitted. And as explained by Mr. Tarbert, changes to the scheme were made in light of that full consultation exercise. The pre-application process was, of course, in addition to the full publicity and consultation process that then took place in respect of the application itself, when residents have had the full opportunity to consider the application itself and make representations about it. Yet the basic problem remains. People have objected to the scheme in light of the campaign of objections, say no, or the petition, or the template letter objection, or what's stated in the Rule 6 parties of a case, and of course now originally in what was the council's reasons for refusal. But it's based on representations about what the development proposed, which are simply incorrect. They have acted on what they've been told or incorrectly understood about the application, which is flawed in so many ways. And this frenzy of misunderstanding reached its height at the committee meeting. There, the objective and correct analysis of what's proposed, and as it's been assessed in the committee report, was cast aside on the night, delete the by, you know why that's coming. I should say any typos are entirely my responsibility, madam. I'm sorry for typing skills or lack thereof. Instead, members apparently relied upon a concept of perception, as Mr. Churchill put it, rather than actuality. And that's a reason why you're faced with the inherent contradiction of reason for refusal too. It was a reason for refusal which on its face raised technical objection to the appeal scheme on noise, air quality and traffic congestion grounds despite the environmental statement and transport assessment and the traffic modelling showing that the objections were unfounded. And when challenged by the appellant regarding an appeal, the council accepted that the reason for refusal was not based on any technical appraisal and no technical evidence would be called. It was said to be about perception. As I said in opening, this is a nonsense. One cannot have a perception of noise other than the noise itself. And there is an objective assessment of any noise increase demonstrating it would be imperceptible. The same is true of noise, I should say air quality rather than noise. The same is true of air quality and congestion. Mr. Churchill attempted to defend this in his written evidence, but immediately abandoned it when tested under cross-examination. He quickly agreed there was no objective basis for the reason for refusal. It was unceremoniously abandoned. But yet the reason it was advanced was because of the failure I've addressed above, now still reflected in the position of the parish council and the residents group. Those Rule 6 parties and the people they represent are still acting in the belief that the proposal will be harmful in terms of noise, air quality, congestion, and their fear of the scheme is based on that perception. But those fears are baseless and the objections consequently flawed. This is a problem that runs right through all the remaining objections, both in writing and in the closing submissions, and ecology is just another example, as is traffic congestion. The same is true for each of the other reasons for refusal that are now withdrawn, and in particular, reason for refusal 1, alleged harm to the scale of Cliffe. Mr. Churchill candidly accepted there was no justifiable basis for alleging harm to the character of Cliffe by virtue of adding 250 houses, in light of the appraisals in terms of landscape character, visual impact, and design that have been produced. And this reason for refusal is irreconcilable in terms of basic principles of consistency in any event. The council has accepted the growth of Cliffe Woods, a smaller settlement than Cliffe, by nearly 400 houses without there being any intrinsic scale issue in any event. And Mr. Churchill accepted that this reason for refusal in fact only related to the question of sustainability excuse me, under reason for refusal 4. And there was no separate concern in relation to the effect of the proposal on the character of the area, despite the way it was put in reason for refusal 1. And no one's brought any meaningful evidence to challenge that provided by the expert appraisal of Mr. Tarbert, as independently assessed by the Design Southeast Review panel and the council itself. Far from causing any harm to the character of the area, the proposed development will in fact improve the design of Cliffe in this particular area, which is not its historic part, by knitting together the historic fabric. And what's more, the development will, in design terms, remedy the problems of the past by, for example, not turning its back on the countryside, by creating a well-designed form of development that addresses the countryside positively, unlike the existing boundary, to improve the appearance of the area. And I refer to Mr. Tarbert's evidence in full, which I incorporate, but I'm not going to repeat. No one challenged his assessment of the benefits in urban design terms, and that's now supported by the principle of a design code and an exemplar form of development to reflect the government's Building Beautiful agenda, something which this part of the village currently relacks, all a matter for subsequent reserved matters, I should say. Reason for refusal 2 was abandoned, and we, as I've said, simply had no objective basis. All of the empirical evidence resoundingly demonstrates the absence of any harm in terms of noise, air quality or congestion to the residents on the roads. And I refer you to the evidence of Mr. Boakes, Mr. Brownstone and Mr. Hamshaw and the supporting ES material, which sets this out in full. Reason for refusal has similarly been withdrawn. Mr. Churchill explained that it related solely to the question of access and accessibility to the new sports facilities rather than their quality, which he accepted would be enhanced, and that it did not address the other benefits of the scheme in terms of amenity space to be provided for all the other informal uses. And in terms of access and accessibility, he accepted there was no safety or technical issue in the use of shared surface streets to access the new sports pitches and facilities, as recognised by the council officers and the local highway authorities. Such use of village streets is common generally, but also in Cliffe, and it's clearly safe and accessible. And in any event, he agreed and recognised the council's now accepted that the intention to use RS 87 to access the sports pitch on foot and cycle, it being a public byway, was always part of the scheme and was an appropriate route. And on the analysis presented, the facilities would indeed be accessible and in a suitable location, as Sport England has confirmed. Council's now withdrawn this reason for refusal in light of the additional contribution offered to improve the public rights of way, including RS 87, and the further benefit that this creates for accessibility to the facilities as well as for the settlement generally. Madam, we'll just pause there. We don't have the completed 106, but that enhanced contribution is reflected in the draft, where the £50 per dwelling contribution has been increased to £100 per dwelling, to double the public rights of way contribution enhancements. Reason for refusal 4 has been abandoned by the council in light of Mr Churchill's actual understanding of the range of measures proposed in conjunction with the imperial scheme, including in particular the shuttle bus service to Strew Station as set out above. Council now rightly accepted there is no logical basis for treating Cliffe as unsustainable in the light of the approach it's adopted to Cliffe Woods, which has only marginally different facilities, but which will be served by the same public transport measures that are considered to make Cliffe Woods sustainable for nearly 400 new homes. But in addition, it was clear that Mr Churchill had misapplied the MPPF definition of sustainable transport modes in any event. Use of ultra-low emission vehicles and zero emission vehicles is a sustainable transport mode. Each of the proposed new houses will be equipped with charging points to enable the residents to use electric vehicles. And in addition, the appellant has always proposed to create electrical vehicle points for existing residents as well, so increasing their opportunity to own and use such vehicles. As that reason refusal has been abandoned and no material challenge made to the evidence of Mr Hamshaw and Mr Woods on the assessment of sustainability, I incorporate that evidence in full. I don't deal with it in detail here. We say there's no material challenge to it and none raised during the inquiry in questioning. Accordingly, as I've indicated in opening, I do have no hesitation in commending the appeal scheme to you for approval in the absence of any reason for refusal from the local planning authority, and in the circumstances where the main issues that were raised are no longer main issues between the parties. And I refer you to Mr Edwards' assessment of the development plan, the neighbourhood plan, the MPPF and other material considerations, the tilted balance and the lack of 5-year housing supply, and the identified benefits of the appeal scheme in social, economic and environmental terms, including biodiversity net gain, the enormous and delivery of enhanced sport pitch and facilities in a suitable location, and each of the other benefits of delivery he's identified, coupled with the absence of harm to designated sites, for example, or environmental designations. Overall, the benefits of the scheme, we say, are truly overwhelming, and there are not material harms, let alone those which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh any such benefits that are being advanced. But more for the sake of formality, I will briefly summarise the position under the statutory test and the list of main issues that were previously referenced in the reason for refusal, but which are no longer material in the same way, and then turn to deal briefly with some other issues raised by the Rule 6 parties and residents. First of all, the Act, the 38(6) of the 2004 Act and Section 72 of the 1990 Act. In accordance with those provisions, the appeal scheme falls to be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan is fully addressed by Mr Edwards, along with the weight to be given to it in light of the MPPF and the housing line supply situation in Medway. The council officers concluded in their committee report that the development was in accordance with the development plan. Mr Edwards reaches a similar conclusion. The council members identified the limited respects in which they were asserting conflict with provisions of the development plan, see the reasons for refusal. However, those reasons have been withdrawn, so any alleged conflict with the development plan has been withdrawn. It's unnecessary to go into that detail in response. For example, Mr Churchill alleged conflict with policies, I should say S1 and S2, not S1 and S2 and BNE1 of the local plan. But as he accepted, the fact that developments proposed in a greenfield location doesn't automatically create conflict with the development plan. And policies S1 and S2, contrary to his written evidence, have been found to be inconsistent with the framework by the Secretary of State himself in dealing with the 250 home scheme for Cliffe Woods. See that passage in committee report. He accepted that if the proposal were considered to be in a sustainable location, there would be no conflict with policies S1 and S2, where the development plan's out of date. It's common ground that the majority of Medway's housing needs will need to be met on greenfield sites. Equally, it will be necessary to use best and most versatile agricultural land, such that exceptional circumstances for its use exist, and there was no challenge to the officer's assessment of use of agricultural land in the report, which was accepted by members and Mr. Churchill. And fourthly, the proposal was in a sustainable location, given the analysis of the Cliffe Woods decision, once he took into account the public transport measures he had omitted from his analysis, not for. And fifthly, there was no issue with the proposal in terms of BNE1, in terms of design, given that this was an outline planning application, but where the principle of a well-designed development was accepted and controlled by the council through reserved matters supplemented by a design code. Accordingly, the council doesn't allege any conflict with the development plan, let alone any material harm, and the appellant's evidence on that has now essentially gone unchallenged. I refer you to Mr. Edwards' proof, coupled with that of the council's own officers in the committee report. Turning to the tilted balance, it's common ground that that applies under paragraph 11 because of the housing land supply shortfall and its persistence. So even if there were any conflict with the development plan or harm, that would have to be such to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits to justify refusing permission against the consequential presumption, and that's clearly not the case. And then turning to the neighbourhood plan, it's still not been formally made, if I'm being strictly accurate about it, but by the time you write your decision, unless you do it very quickly, we assume the plan will have been made and part of the development plan. But it's common ground between Mr. Edwards and Mr. Churchill that the disapplication of the tilted balance under paragraph 14 of the framework is not triggered, as the neighbourhood plan does not make allocations for housing. It clearly does not. Councillor Fribbins has sought to make an inference that it does, but it's impossible to see how that can be sustained. There are simply no allocations in the plan. And policy H1 is a recognition of this, dealing with anticipated future applications for development that will come to be made for major housing on greenfield sites. He sought to suggest that because the Cliffe Woods settlement boundary has been amended to reflect consented schemes, these are allocations to meet the housing need. That is obviously not the case. These boundaries simply reflect what's consented. They are not allocations. And the fact of policy H1 contemplating major housing development is inconsistent with the notion that there are allocations for such housing in respect of consented development, as consented development doesn't require permission. So it's clear and obvious that the neighbourhood plan recognises the need for new housing in its area. It states as much. It doesn't purport to allocate the land to meet that need, and it's not gone through an allocations process. That's all the more the case in relation to its recognition for affordable housing, where Mr. Churchill confirmed that affordable housing is to be delivered as a percentage of market housing. The neighbourhood plan does not affect the tilted balance, and in any event, there's no conflict with it, as both Mr. Edwards and Mr. Churchill have identified and confirmed. The proposal conforms with policy H1 in bringing forward a community hub and significant open spaces with the enhanced sports facilities anyway, and no other conflict has actually been alleged by the council, who did consider the neighbourhood plan, or in fact by the parish council. Reference was made to the approach to agricultural land, but the need to use agricultural land is recognised by Medway in its own committee report and has been repeatedly recognised in all appeal decisions for this area. And no one has suggested how or where you could develop in Medway or the neighbourhood plan area without using agricultural land. The appeal scheme therefore accords with the development plan in all material respects, as the council officers recognise and the council now accepts, having withdrawn its reason for refusal. Turning then to issue 1, the effect on character and the appearance. As noted, the council's confirmed this is no longer an issue. It's not alleging any harmful effect in this respect, and wasn't. It was about sustainability. And in any event, the appeal scheme's effect on character and appearance has been comprehensively assessed in the normal way, with a landscape visual impact assessment, then consideration of the scheme in urban design terms through the design review panel process. The details are subject to control as an outline planning application, but it's clear from the unchallenged evidence from Mr. Tarbert that the appeal scheme will have no harmful effect on the character and appearance of the area of the countryside, but indeed introduce some material benefits to their character, which he's identified in his evidence, which weren't contradicted by anyone. The council's concern as to scale in terms of 25% increase was a sustainability issue alone, rather than one of character and appearance. I should also note, as Mr. Edwards drew your attention to, the council's report on the application was based on the mistaken assumption that the landscape is an ALLI, or alley as it's known, which it is not, and therefore the conclusions it reached apply with even greater force when one realises no such designation is applicable. And the appeal scheme will of course be subject to careful control under the detailed design process with the design code proposed. I commend to you Mr. Tarbert's highly considered and comprehensive analysis that has informed that design code and the thought and applicable principles that apply to it. I should just add, including the neighbourhood plan guidelines, as he explained, neighbourhood plan design guidelines. That, for example, ensures that areas like the semi-natural open space will be created and designed to be overlooked by housing that fronts to the countryside in an appropriate way, rather than turning its back on it with fences in the unattractive way it does currently. Will provide natural surveillance of such areas, along with the internal design features such as the village green, amenity areas, laps, leaps, again with their surveillance. The overall effect will be a huge increase in recreation areas, both for future and existing residents, designed to be of the highest quality, so improving access to recreation and nature in accordance with the framework as confirmed by Mr. Churchill. Turning to the effect on residential amenity, the only adverse effect in the reason for refusal was in fact in relation to properties fronting the road accessing Cliffe, the B2000, not any other effect on residential amenity. That's been withdrawn. There's no objective basis for the harm asserted on noise, air quality or congestion grounds, as I've explained. It never had an objective basis and was unreasonable. No one's brought any evidence to challenge the technical assessments, despite having the opportunity to do so. Some questions were raised to Mr. Hamshaw about the modelling work, but they went nowhere. The link capacity of the B2000 has been appropriately identified, and the modelling's been scrutinised by the local highway authority and endorsed. Suggesting that it's somehow deficient without explaining why or how is not a proper basis for criticism. It takes full account of all consented and planned development. It's used various different modelling assumptions to test itself for robustness. And merely asserting the calibration of the council's own traffic model is deficient without explaining why is nonsensical. It's been validated against surveyed results, and points of challenge such as to whether to use a 60-40 split on the link capacity assumption or 50% are pointless, as they don't affect the overall result in terms of the capacity identified. No one's challenged the noise or air quality modelling that applies those traffic assumptions. This suggestion that was based on new information or doesn't take account of updates in the environmental statement are simply wrong. No other harm to residential amenity has been identified or supported by meaningful evidence. Some reference has been made to effects on residential properties adjoining the new sports facilities, but no coherent explanation of actual harm has been identified. The council confirmed that this was addressed by a condition, and you've seen the condition on hours of use, I think, Madam. And the only evidence that was heard from a resident about this was in fact explaining how she enjoyed hearing activity on the existing APCM facilities, a point which logically applies to the new sports pitches and facilities. By contrast to the absence of any harm, the very significant benefits to residential amenity resulting from the scheme need to be taken into account, including in particular, first, the improvement to the road system through the road improvements Mr. Hamshaw identified. These directly tackle and improve what residents complain about in terms of on-street parking affecting the flow of traffic and the use of the roads, along with better footway and crossing points down Church Street, and improved roundabout arrangement at the entrance to the village, coupled with all the other benefits, for example, a passing space in Buckway Lane. Although I know residents are resistant to change, on an objective analysis, the road improvements are in fact tackling the very things that they're complaining about as existing problems. The net effect is an improvement in the safety of the village, as Mr. Hamshaw explained. And again, no one's challenged the technical assessments or endorsement by the local highway authority. Each of the road improvements has been subject to a road safety audit. Then there are the improvements to the bus services, including the introduction of the new shuttle bus service. Then there are the enhanced sports pitches and facilities, including the new pavilion. Then there is the huge area of dedicated new public open space to be created for use by all residents, including the semi-natural open space area. And then there are the enhancements to the public rights-of-way network, with a new pedestrian and cycling route to the west of the village, and upgrades to the existing network. It is unfortunate that residents objecting have simply not realised, for the reasons set out above, what is on offer and will be delivered. Turning then to the effect on facilities, including the existing APCM sports ground. Again, this is no longer a main issue with the council withdrawing its refusal. That withdrawal is long overdue, but it is clearly a point which residents have spent most time on, based on their misunderstanding of what's clearly proposed. The objective position, we say, is clear and uncontrovertible. First of all, the APCM sports ground is an area of approximately 2.7 hectares, which currently provides both sports pitch and facilities which are not in good condition, and in the case of the pavilion, positively dilapidated, and in addition, an area on the same space for informal uses such as dog walking and informal recreation. The appeal scheme will re-provide all of the sports pitches and facilities in an enhanced form on a bigger site in a location which is closer to more residents than currently, where it's now accepted the facilities will be an enhancement in terms of what's on offer. Sports England has confirmed twice that this re-provision meets their exceptions policy criteria, including being in a suitable location. The relevant sports bodies confirm that they support these new facilities, and it's easy to see why. They will serve the community in terms of sports provision far better than the current facilities, for the reasons Mr. Grady has explained. And the area is significantly larger than the existing APCM ground as well. I think it's 3.7 hectares. The new sports pitch and facilities themselves can still be used for all of the informal uses on the APCM in the way it was used. No one has explained why they can't. Mr. Grady confirmed they can. You can use the area for informal football, cricket, kite flying, just as the APCM is used, of course, when matches are not being played, as for the APCM. The suggestion to the contrary is illogical. But however, far from this being the only replacement area of a bigger kind, which it is, the appeal scheme will not just deliver lap leaps for children's play available for all, with its own amenity space within the residential areas, but in addition, the huge 9.2 hectares of semi-natural open space for recreation use. The details of how that's to be laid out are for detailed approval and subject to council control in the ordinary way, and you've seen the condition. But it's obvious that it forms part of the proposal. It's in the planning statement, it's in the environmental statement, it's in the plans, and it's the subject of the conditions which you've seen attached to the committee report and now in the statement of common ground. We simply do not understand the criticism that its use for informal recreation is something new or something that's not been considered or factored into consideration for the application. It's always formed part of the proposal, it's identified for recreational use, and the council itself proposed a condition that deals specifically with the subsequent details to come forward. No one has objected to the principle of that use, be it Design South East, Kent County Council Ecology, Kent Police or the Designing Out Crime Officer, or the council officers, or council members. It's now suggested by the residents group that its use for recreation will not encourage things like nesting birds, but it's of course never been proposed as that sort of ecological site. It's a recreational space and was identified as such to relieve pressure on the wildlife sites beyond where birds do exist. That's explained in the documents and was obviously well understood by RSPB, who have not objected to the proposal and recognised it would be used by recreational users and dog walkers. Even if you ignore the sports pitch and facilities area entirely, that's 3.7 hectares, and were simply to assume that the APCM could be used for informal use all the time, rather than being shared for informal and formal uses, it's obvious that the informal uses accommodated APCM can be accommodated within the semi-natural open space area, threefold in size. The suggestion now appears to be it would conflict with it being an area of ecology enhancement or buffer zone for the SPA. That's clearly not the case, and no evidence being provided to support that. The area is not shown for planting in that way, never has been. Its boundaries to the west are shown as planted, but it's a huge area where such boundaries do not affect its size. It's always been identified for recreation, and every informal use of the APCM can be more than accommodated in the size of the area, as Mr. Tarbert and Mr. Edwards has explained. And of course done so with natural surveillance, etc., and without any conflict with sports pitch and facilities when they are in use, because of the separate area for those, although you can also use the sports pitch and facilities themselves for those uses. There was then a suggestion that relocation of informal use had not been the subject of consultation with sports bodies. But that makes no sense. Neither Sport England nor any of the sports bodies would be consulted on informal uses such as dog walking on sport pitches and facilities, and no body is identified who would be consulted on such things. But of course, the local planning authority, bodies like Kent County Council, have been consulted upon the application, and they clearly accept what is proposed. In reality, the objections started on the basis that the Rule 6 parties simply didn't take account of that semi-natural open space area in their objections. Look back and see how it was previously put. They're now attempting to criticise its potential use, but those criticisms are without foundation and ignore its obvious merits and virtues. Back to the sports pitch and facilities area, there will be a community use agreement that confirms community use can continue anyway on that area, regardless of the semi-natural open space additional area, as per Sport England's conditions. And what's more, the land will be dedicated in perpetuity through the Fields in Trust proposal. The APCM has no such dedication and is subject only to the yearly lease, which can end. And issues have been made about accessibility to the new sports pitch and facilities, which unfortunately are riddled with contradiction. The new sports pitch and facilities will be more accessible to more of the settlement, see Mr. Hamshaw and Mr. Grady's assessment, regardless of where access is taken from the FP. I think it's RS, I don't know why I put FP, that's footpath, restricted byway 87. It will be accessible for all on appropriate surfaces, whether from Buckway Lane or RS87 or the new pedestrian and cycle route to the west. That access will be safe, as confirmed by the local highway authority. Mr. Hamshaw has dealt in full with the ability to use shared surfaces safely and normally for a location such as this, as introduced by Manual for Streets. Buckway Lane is a lightly trafficked, speed-controlled, straight road already used as a shared surface, where a new passing space is to be installed with street lighting up to the entrance and speed control beyond the entrance. New parking facilities for the sports pitch and facilities will be provided, in contrast to the existing APCM, which relies on street parking, which residents complain about occurring on Church Street in a different breath. In addition, RS87 provides a pedestrian and cyclist route east-west to the south, and a brand new pedestrian and cyclist public right-of-way will be provided, suitably serviced, north-south, immediately to the west of the ground, running down past the existing recreation facilities, the new development designed to address it, and down to Higham Road, linking the southern part of the village with the north with that new dedicated pedestrian and cyclist route. By contrast, the APM is further away from the centre of the village in terms of population. It's not actually accessed to the east by any legal highway network, and certainly not on paved surfacing, hence we say the double standards that are being applied in the criticisms to the new facility. And it doesn't have dedicated parking, and there is not tactile paving to the facilities as was claimed. An issue has been raised about the surveillance of the new sport pitch and facilities, but that's in circumstances where first Sport England are satisfied it is an appropriate location, as is Mr. Grady. Secondly, Mr. Grady has confirmed in all his experience he's never encountered the need for or requirements of surveillance of sports pitches or facilities of this kind, which are intended for sports use. Thirdly, the principle of surveillance over the APCM in terms of dog walking or children playing there confuses that use with sports pitches and facilities, but where the dedicated new children's play areas will be subject to surveillance and detailed design, and the areas of recreation and amenity space will be similarly designed, as explained by Mr. Tarbert. And in any event, there is in fact going to be public access and surveillance of the sports pitches, which we say is not materially different anyway. And there is no empirical evidential basis for concern about surveillance in relation to the village or its use. For example, the rugby club facilities, which do not have houses looking onto them, or a road, for example, are said to be thriving, as Councillor Fribbins described. And we ask you to note that the residents group specifically wrote to Sport England and the Designing Out Crime Officer to try and get them to object to the proposed sports facilities location by reference to all the points that they pursued at the inquiry, but neither body did. Indeed, Sport England explicitly state that having reviewed the position and consulted with the sports bodies, they are not altering their position. That, of course, requires them to be satisfied that this is a suitable location for what's proposed. Concluding otherwise, as the residents groups invite you to do, as they did Sport England, in the face of all the expert evidence, is untenable. Issues have been raised about RS87. These are wrong in principle. Again, the legal position is straightforward. RS87 is a public highway. Obstruction of it is illegal. It should have been maintained for use by the landowner and Medway Council. Policy strongly supports use of public rights-of-way in any event. Medway Council is entitled and obliged to maintain it along its current alignment for pedestrians and cyclist access, even if they currently fail to do so. Trentport is entitled to access it from their land, which directly adjoins it. Hedgerow vegetation preventing such access is illegal for people passing along it. The proposed use of it to get to the sports pitch and facilities is lawful, but more importantly, to be encouraged in terms of use of public rights-of-way. The details of any such access are a matter for detailed design as identified. We're not seeking approval of now, but even if one simply travelled to the western end of RS87, it provides a convenient, direct and usable route into the sports pitch and facilities and links harmoniously with the existing area of recreation facilities. The notion that it somehow ends safe when it comes directly off Church Street and is an existing public rights-of-way which provides access to the recreation facilities grounds behind already is without foundation. Again, this appeal scheme will assist in bringing an existing public rights-of-way back into proper use, increasing sustainable accessibility in and around the village. There are no issues that have been raised in the use of such public rights-of-way in terms of designing out crime by Kent Police, and the crime statistics do not support it. And as Mr. Grady points out, providing proper enhanced sports facilities actually reduces antisocial behaviour. See the Sport England research. The overall effect is that the community of Cliffe, both existing and new residents, will have better and enhanced sports pitch facilities in a more central and suitable location to a very high standard, which can be used for informal and formal use, supported by the sports bodies, in addition to the huge additional areas of recreational space with the appeal scheme and the 9.2 hectares of semi-natural open space available to the public. There will be a dramatic enhancement over the existing APCM situation, representing a very significant benefit for all. Turning then to the fourth issue, sustainability, that again has been withdrawn as a reason for refusal and there wasn't any basis for it. In fact, the whole package of measures in relation to transportation, ranging from electric vehicle encouragement, new shuttle bus and enhanced 133 service, the enhancements to public rights-of-way for cyclists and pedestrians, we say the position is very clear, as set out in the transport evidence, Mr. Hanshaw's proof of evidence. Cliffe will be rendered significantly more sustainable for both future and existing residents, something strongly supported by the framework and of direct benefit for all. As a matter of basic consistency, as the Council had previously accepted, it would also be contrary to that principle of consistency to reach any other conclusion about it being a sustainable location than that which was applied to Cliffwoods in terms of the public transport measures. In fact, this scheme also delivers the many other benefits to Cliffe itself in terms of public rights-of-way improvements addressed by Mr. Hamshaw in evidence. The fifth issue you identified was the 5-year supply and weight policies. But Madam, I think I've addressed that under the first issue in terms of the statutory framework and the tilted balance set out by Mr. Edwards. Other matters. A range of other miscellaneous matters have been raised by Rule 6 parties or residents which have been addressed by the appellant in evidence or supporting material, and we say without substance. In summary, flooding. There's no issue in this regard. The developed areas of the site are all within flood zone 1. The SPA and the Ramsar. There's no adverse impact on these areas, as is agreed in light of the assessments that have been done, given the design of the scheme, the contributions that have been sought and agreed. Agricultural land. The nature of the agricultural land has been assessed by Reading agricultural consultants, majority grade 3A, some in limited areas in grade 2. The suggestion of an error in respect of irrigation is simply wrong and contrary to 20 years established practice as set out in the response note. The necessary use of best and most versatile land is uncontroversial so far as the Council is concerned and the many appeal decisions. It is essential to meet the Council's most basic needs. Health impacts. Health was scoped out of the environmental statement for a 500-unit scheme, and there's been no challenge to that. Nonetheless, the appellant produced a health impact assessment which has now been criticised. There isn't any basis for criticism of it. Each of the judgments made is obviously correct. For example, providing new homes, some of which are accessible, will improve the position for the elderly and less mobile as compared with the current situation, is obviously a benefit. The effect on healthcare is addressed by the contributions that are being provided in accordance with the primary healthcare providers' requirements based on their assessment of need and identified facilities in the area. Criticisms are made of that assessment, but those are matters for the primary healthcare providers, and the appellant is acting consistently, as is the Council, with all other development in providing such contributions. For example, criticism is made of the HIA referring to the number of GPs, 12, employed, rather than referring to the full-time equivalent, which results in a figure of 6.89. That's not an error, it's just a different way of expressing the same point. But more importantly, as Mr. Edwards explained, this sort of deference doesn't affect the HIA itself, because it's based upon providing a contribution to address specifically the additional residents and their use of GPs and GP surgeries. Those are based on the numbers of new residents proposed and what's required to address them as calculated by the Council and the primary healthcare provider. Suggesting that this is an error in the HIA and its approach is just wrong. Sewage provision. There is no objection to the ability to serve the scheme properly by the sewage undertaker in the area, who are under a statutory duty to provide such services. The community hub building. It in fact provides opportunity for other uses to be provided in the village in due course anyway. It's for Class E uses, allowing full flexibility in the provision of any eligible use, for example, further health or dental facilities or post office or whatever else would suit the community best. It will not compete with the community building as addressed by a condition. Ecology. The effects of the appeal scheme on the matters of ecology have been fully assessed in the ES by experts in ecology. The criticisms now advanced in respect of house martin, badger and bats are without foundation, as addressed in the response note and the original ES assessment. There are no such impacts, and in fact, if people, as they claim, are concerned about ecology, then they should recognise the biodiversity net gain the scheme will deliver, consistent with the fact that opportunities for ecology benefits arise from developments of this kind, and that's what is actually proposed. Again, it's ironic that significant objections now being promoted to development on the basis of ecology, things like house martin, where the reality is that the appeal scheme will deliver significant environmental benefit. Education, the same principle applies. Appropriate contributions have been assessed and are being provided to address the educational needs from the appeal scheme. Rugby club. The appeal scheme has no adverse impact on the rugby club and its pitch. The benefits of the other facilities being added are clear. Traffic and safety and congestion. Repeated concerns to be raised of this sort based on a lack of appreciation of what's proposed. The appeal scheme in fact delivers safety improvements to the traffic environment in Cliffe and the B2000 and enhancements to the public rights of way itself in a safe way as endorsed by the local highway authority. Not only is a new pedestrian and cycling route created to the west, but there are improvements of RS87 and RS84. There can't be a sensible objection to delivery of such improvements if people are serious about encouraging pedestrians and cyclists to travel around Cliffe by such sustainable means. The safety of the scheme has been confirmed by Mr. Hanshaw and endorsed by the local highway authority, as already mentioned. Construction effects. Misplaced fears have been expressed about the construction effects of the scheme. Whilst traffic management will be necessary to make the improvements to the roads and create accesses, that is true of any road scheme proposal. But no closure of the B2000 is required, as Mr. Hanshaw explained, and short-term constructional effects will deliver the improvements to congestion and safety Mr. Hanshaw has identified. And in fact, the appeal scheme nature means that once these improvements are in place, access can be taken to the eastern and western parts of the site without using Buckway Lane for HGVs. And in addition, the whole scheme construction will be subject to a construction environmental management plan in the ordinary way, which can manage all the construction effects in a safe and efficient way accepted by the council and identify Mr. Hanshaw. And then pedestrian and cyclist provision. Again, criticisms are made about this, but where the appeal scheme delivers significant enhancements to the public rights of way network and creates a new one on the west side of the village, the net benefits are clear. Madam, we understand that residents are resistant to change, and have voiced objection. The same was true in respect of Cliffe Woods, as you'll see from CD98A. But it is deeply regrettable that most of the objection is not based upon any of the realities of the huge benefits of the appeal scheme, and it's instead based on fears of impacts which simply will not occur. Objective analysis of the scheme reveals it's compliant with the development plan. It will deliver huge benefits in providing housing and affordable housing, whilst improving the environment and sustainability of Cliffe for all. In planning terms, this is a scheme that's not just acceptable, it should be strongly supported and welcomed, as the council has now appreciated in withdrawing all of its reasons for refusal. Indeed, if schemes of this ideal and well-designed nature are refused in light of an objective appraisal, where it does deliver such significant benefits, there's no hope of addressing Medway's housing and affordable housing needs or complying with the framework. We therefore commend it to you, and we warmly invite you to allow this appeal to proceed, to allow it to proceed, to let this much needed new scheme be realised. Thank you very much, man. I think I did rather better than my estimate, but probably still too long anyway.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Strawn. Thank you. So that concludes the closing submissions. So there's just a few procedural matters that need to be finalised. So in terms of the section 106, it's probably a good idea to agree a sort of a date to begin with for a review. I mean, I was thinking perhaps 5 working days. That takes us to the 31st of May, whether we could work to that if possible, and then if a further extension is needed, that can be considered.
Can I just take instructions, because
yeah.
What I'm not aware of is whether the changes are extensive. I wouldn't apprehend them to be, but I haven't actually seen them. But I'll see if I can get any.
That's fine. I mean, I'm happy to leave it with you, and we can confirm the date in writing if that's easier, because, like you say, you need to see it.
Yes, sorry.
That's fine.
Trying to use WhatsApp at the same time.
Yeah, let's talk.
Madam, should I just say what my instructions were, which was to ask for the end of the week to agree a final version with the appellant. Of course, if more time is needed, absolutely fine, so far as we're concerned, because I'm conscious that we've only provided the comments this morning. And then to ask again for a week or two for final signed copies, but again, that will also be subject to the appellant's timetabling, and I'm in their hands as to how long they will need.
That's fine. Shall we say if I could be provided with an update at the end of the week, sort of by close of play on Friday, just to see where we are, and then we'll take it from there, because then you'll have had a better idea of what's actually in the agreement. So
yes, that's absolutely fine, and we'll of course copy in Councillor Fribbins and the
yes, thank you.
The Rule 6 group.
Councillor Fribbins, your hand's up.
Yes, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, because these are Section 106 agreements have been mainly between Medway Council and the appellant, and not specifically involved the parish council to any real extent in representing the details included in the neighbourhood plan. There were some specific requests. If we are to see a development of this size, this may be one of the final or last opportunities to seek Section 106 contributions for specific issues raised in the neighbourhood plan. Although that was looked at by Medway Council, I don't think it came to certainly from our point of view, a satisfactory conclusion. I believe that this may be one of the last real opportunities to seek some of those 106 contributions, improve matters that are raised in neighbourhood plan. So we do appear or have the perception, horrible word, but the perception of being excluded from this process.
Thank you, Councillor Fribbins. I mean, normally the procedure is for the legal agreements to be dealt with between the appellant and the council, and I think in terms of the content itself, that's something you do perhaps need to take up with the council, because we've obviously had their statements about why things are included. I think Mr. Storn and Mr. Dufour has said that they will actually circulate the document to you as well, so you are aware of exactly what's in there. Mr. Storn has got his hand up.
Thank you, Madam. Can I just to be clear, we have had obviously the Section 106 session when the draft was discussed, and obviously Councillor Fribbins took part in that, and therefore had any further contributions been sought reference to the neighbourhood plan, that would have been the place to do it. I wasn't aware of any being requested. The additional contribution that is the subject of the change, or as far as I'm aware, the main change is that what I explained, which is an increase in the public right-of-way contribution, £50 per dwelling to £100 per dwelling, which I think it takes it up from whatever the mass is, but it takes it up to £25,000 rather than after 25,200. But there were no other there weren't any other contributions sought in the Section 106 session by the parish council that I.
Madam, I disagree. I did raise it at the round table, but I think one of the problems we have is, again, of sequencing and timing. We haven't established the proper protocol for responding to the neighbourhood plan requirements at this stage, because it's so close to the adoption, which will take place tonight. Because I'm not convinced that Medway Council have necessarily taken all the issues which are in the neighbourhood plan into consideration. I did raise that at the round table as something that needed to be considered. At the moment, yes, but I acknowledge the advice that is an issue for Medway Council to respond to. Say the issue is at this stage we haven't got that formal protocol in place for them to actually consider and respond to the Section 106 requirements, which are clearly stated and evidenced and justified in the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Councillor Fribbins. I have got a note and a sort of a recollection of you mentioning the neighbourhood plan in relation to Section 106 agreements at the round table session. Obviously, the council and appellant are bound by their relevant planning documents, and it was something I think that they did look at and they did clarify in email a couple of points after the roundtable session. So now it's not really the place after we've heard closings, isn't the place to sort of raise it again. But the parties have said that they will keep you in the loop on the Section 106 agreement, so you can see actually what the content is in there. And if you have any queries, I'm sure the council officers can assist you once you've seen the document.
Madam, just to confirm what you said, we did pick this up after the roundtable session in light of Councillor Fribben's comments. The council has looked at it again and doesn't think that there's anything additional required in consequence of the neighbourhood plan. I'm not aware of any specific additional contribution that Councillor Fribbens has mentioned, but and as you say, it's now a stage of the inquiry when that would be difficult to start trying to deal with. But of course, council officers will be available to discuss matters with Councillor Fribbens should he wish to take that up with them.
Thank you. Thank you. So we agreed then, so the 26th, close of play Friday, just for a further update on the legal agreement once you've had all a chance to have a look at it. I'll just check. Dr. Brunskill's still there, isn't he? I've only got 3 people showing on my screen. I just want to make sure.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just try to minimise the gardening noise.
Oh, that no, it's fine. We can't hear it. That's fine. I wanted to make sure that you were present for the last few procedural matters. Thank you. Whilst we're talking about the neighbourhood plan, then it would be helpful for me if someone could just drop a line to the case officer tomorrow, just confirming the outcome of tonight's meeting, just so that I've got it formally recorded, as it will have happened before I make my decision. I will finish the inquiry documents list and I'll circulate that to all parties as well, just to check that we've all got the same documents that have been submitted during. Are there any other procedural matters that need to be finalised?
Madam, one procedural matter. During Mr. Strawn's closing submissions, I was sent a updated statement of common ground to be agreed between the appellant and the local planning authority. I've had a quick look at it, and if I can put it this way, it's likely that the version that's been sent to me or something very similar will be agreed shortly, but I haven't had the opportunity to take instructions. Essentially, what it does is to confirm the position between the parties in light of our amended statement of case. So just for completeness, we will agree that between us and get that to you in short order. Perhaps if I say by the time of the 26th, when you have the update on the Section 106, but I would be hopeful that we can sort that out this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Yep, that's absolutely fine. If that can be circulated to the parties, then thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any further matters? Nope. Okay, so I'd just like to thank everyone who attended, even if some people aren't here today, and for all your contributions. It's been very thorough, it's been very helpful to me, and I do appreciate the time taken for everyone to attend and contribute. So thank you very much for that. That means then that the inquiry is now closed, with the exception of the submission of the Section 106 and the amended statement of common ground. So thank you very much for your time. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam, for your tolerance of us poor old.
Not at all. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's been very helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.